Back in high school, my friends and I frequented a singular hangout spot, a baseball field nestled behind the deserted elementary school. We constantly dreaded arriving one day to find a construction crew demolishing the place, but that day never came, at least not during our childhood. We attributed its untouched state to the town's perceived poverty, which was likely accurate, though it wasn't exactly prime real estate. Located adjacent to the woods, far from the town's main areas, it was essentially in the middle of nowhere, much like our town itself. We cherished this location precisely because no one else did. Occasionally, people would break into the school for some graffiti, and sometimes the police would show up. But they never ventured onto the baseball field. It was our group's sanctuary, a particularly crucial haven, given that many of my friends, especially Tim, faced challenging home lives. Tim's mother frequently called the police on him for any reason she could contrive. Yet at the field, we were beyond their reach. Many summer nights were spent there, perched on the rusty bleachers, smoking and discussing anything and everything to pass the time. I adored that place, and so did all my friends. However, even before later events unfolded, one particular detail about the place always unsettled me. An old lamppost right by the bleachers, still operational, glowed with an eerie orange hue. The town must have overlooked it completely. As the sole light source, its orange luminosity enveloped us, offering little actual illumination. Whenever I got particularly high, I'd gaze into the surrounding woods, swallowed by absolute darkness. The thought would always surface: someone or something could easily be watching us, entirely unnoticed. It would gnaw at me until someone would crack a joke or divert my attention, offering a temporary reprieve from the thought. I often wonder how many times they observed us. I'll never know. Early one summer evening, my friend Johnny and I were headed to the field. I must have departed earlier than him, because his car was nowhere in sight when I arrived. I decided to get a head start and walk to the field alone. This was generally frowned upon within our group. Despite our collective self-perception of toughness, solitary walks through the woods at night were not typically part of our routine. I, however, always found a certain thrill in it. I passed the school and traversed the woods to reach the field. I waited for about 10 minutes, but he still hadn't appeared. So I lit a cigarette. Another 30 minutes ticked by, with no sign of him. By this point, the initial thrill had completely faded. I decided to walk back to my car, eventually jogging due to my increasing discomfort. I texted him a few times, but received no reply. After another 10 minutes in my car, I simply drove home. Upon waking, I noticed he still hadn't responded. I felt a bit annoyed, but didn't dwell on it until later that day, when my mum inquired if I'd seen Johnny recently. I contacted all our friends, but they were as clueless as I was. The last any of us had seen him was at the field 2 nights prior. A day passed, then another. Soon the entire town became aware. Search parties proliferated. My friends and I even participated in a few, but he was never found. No one ever found him. To this day, his body has never been recovered. At the time, I tried to convince myself he had simply run away. He was an adventurous kid, always speaking of traveling the world and how the town made him feel claustrophobic. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't just vanish like that. He would have left a note at the very least, probably on the bleachers where no one else would discover it. Approximately a month later, I revisited the field. This time, I went alone. I was so consumed by anger at the world that I cared little if I were attacked by some wild animal lurking in the woods. But as I reached the end of the woods path, I noticed people on the bleachers. For a fleeting moment, I assumed they were my friends, given that we had never encountered anyone else there before. But they weren't. I had never seen these individuals in my life. 3 of them sat utterly motionless on the bleachers, resembling statues. But they weren't the ones who unnerved me. There was another, dancing and skipping around. His unbridled happiness made me uncomfortable, but it wasn't an ordinary kind of joy. At the time, I assumed he was high on Molly. Now, I simply believe he was a deranged psycho. Worst of all, he looked familiar, though I couldn't pinpoint why. It was like seeing an unfamiliar face in a dream. I knew I had seen him before, but the context eluded me. I couldn't bear it. It was just too incredibly strange. So I tried to leave as quietly and quickly as possible. Fortunately, they didn't follow, or at least, I don't think they did. Upon reaching my car, my initial instinct was to flee, but I resisted. Instead, I drove around the school lot. In the back corner of the parking lot, I spotted a car. I recognized the model. It was the same one Johnny drove. Just as I saw it, the lights flickered on. I abruptly reversed and sped out of there. As summer progressed, I couldn't shake them from my thoughts. I confided in all my friends, and while they agreed it was odd, they didn't dwell on it much. I even stopped going to the field because of them. On a late July day, feeling particularly nostalgic and saddened by thoughts of Johnny, I decided to leaf through the yearbook to revisit some memories. That's when I found him. One of the janitors was in the background of a sports picture. The moment I turned the page, I knew it was him. Same face, same hair. It was the dancing man. It had to be. I was in disbelief. I told all my friends, but they were at a loss for what to do. Eventually, I went to the police. I'm pretty sure they thought I was crazy, but they still conducted a background check on the individual, or so they claimed. They found nothing. Even his social security card yielded no leads. I attempted some research myself, but uncovered absolutely nothing. The man was a phantom. Near the end of summer, I returned to the field with a few friends. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling of being watched. Every time I peered into the dark expanse of the woods, I felt a deep sense of fear. I longed for the comfort I once found there, but I knew it was gone. This place was no longer a home to me. When I left that night, I never returned. Near the end of the summer, I was at a Dunkin' Donuts. It was early in the morning, and I was quite groggy until I saw him. The dancing man, the janitor. He looked exactly like him. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but the longer I looked, the more certain I became. Then he saw me and smiled. He rushed out of the store, and I followed him. But one of his associates was parked curbside at the exit. He quickly got into the car and sped away before I could reach him. But what I saw horrified me more than anything else. The license plate of the car they were driving was the same as Johnny's. I knew it because he had a unique plate, 4PAC 207. It was the same car I had seen a month earlier. Then it clicked. That was Johnny's car. They had given it a new paint job, so I hadn't noticed it back then, but I should have. I still blame myself for not realizing sooner. I never saw him or the car again. These days, it's all just a memory, one I desperately wish I could erase. Rest in peace, Johnny. It was the summer of 2024, and my three friends, Jake, Sam, Marcus, and I, were craving a respite from our internship at the Kennedy Space Center. We had been immersed in rocket data for weeks. As avid stargazers, we longed for a night under an impeccably clear sky. We meticulously consulted light pollution maps and Google Maps, pinpointing a secluded clearing deep within Tate's Hell State Forest, a marshy, desolate expanse in Florida's Panhandle. The name originated from an old tale about Sebe Tate, a settler who vanished in the swamp in the 1800s, supposedly under a curse. We dismissed it. Ghost stories were for children. Our sole desire was to observe the stars. Our sanctuary was an Airbnb, a comfortable cabin near Apalachicola, approximately 30 miles from the forest's edge. After work that Friday, we packed my Tesla Model Y and Marcus's Mustang with blankets, snacks, and a telescope. We had no camping gear, as we planned to return to the cabin for sleep. The 7-hour drive from the Space Center was arduous, and we arrived at the Airbnb late, quickly dropping our bags and grabbing a snack before heading back out. The final segment of the journey into Tate's Hell was brutal. Narrow dirt trails winding through dense pines and murky wetlands, the air thick with the chirping of cicadas and the occasional splash of something in the water. With no cell service, we relied on walkie-talkies to communicate between cars, their crackles cutting through the darkness. Around 2 a.m., we reached the clearing, fatigued yet exhilarated. The sky was breathtaking. The stars blazed as if close enough to touch. We spread out blankets, set up the telescope, and began our observations. 15 minutes later, Sam's voice hissed over the walkie-talkie from the Mustang. "Yo, you see those headlights?" My stomach clenched. We turned, and a faint glow appeared along the trail we had just driven in on. Out here, 40 miles from the nearest town, at 2 a.m. in a vast forest, no one was simply passing through. Whoever was out there meant trouble. Jake, in the Tesla with me, picked up his walkie-talkie. "Flash them, see what they do." I flicked the Tesla's headlights. 3 sharp bursts. An old, rusted and battered pickup truck stopped about 100 yards away. There was no honk or wave or any signal. Then we saw them. A shadowy figure emerged, accompanied by what appeared to be 2 or 3 others. The glare made an exact count difficult. They simply stood there, observing us. It was then that faint, hushed voices, low and indistinct, drifted from the swamp. Unintelligible whispers sent shivers down our spines. "This is messed up!" Marcus crackled over the radio, his voice betraying Sam's alarm. "Those voices! Nobody's out here at 2 a.m. for anything good." My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but failed to penetrate the deep shadows where they stood. The soft, sinister whispers persisted, sending chills through me. Jake, attempting to maintain composure, suggested they might be locals, but urged us to relocate. We agreed via walkie-talkie to find a new spot, establishing a rule. If those lights reappeared, we'd race back to the safety of the Airbnb. Turning onto a side trail, we reasoned that anyone following us would be doing so with intent. We sped a mile down the secondary path, found another clearing, and quickly set up our makeshift camp, fueled by apprehension. Within 5 minutes, Marcus's urgent voice pierced the walkie-talkie. "They're back," he declared, and my heart sank. The same headlights, now significantly closer, cut through the darkness. Then came a jarring engine rev, a clear act of intimidation. Sam cried, "Get us out now!" We scrambled into our vehicles, Jake and I in the Tesla, Marcus and Sam in the Mustang. I floored the Tesla, which lurched over roots and branches, its underside scraping like claws. Those headlights clung to us, their high beams blinding me in the rearview mirror. Jake called out to Marcus on the walkie-talkie. "Marcus, you good?" Marcus's strained reply came back. "Barely. They're right there." We were 40 meters from potential help, just 4 young, essentially defenseless interns. At 2 a.m. in a place called Tate's Hell, one doesn't encounter benevolent individuals. I pushed the Tesla to its limits, Marcus's Mustang close behind. The trail veered sharply, and for a fleeting moment as we rounded the bend, the headlights of the pursuing truck vanished. I prayed we had lost them. But moments later, they were back, as if toying with us, knowing we were trapped. We reached a fork, and I swerved left, hoping it would lead to the main road. The truck followed. Finally, after much sustained panic and stress, the dirt track gave way to pavement, and a faded highway sign materialized ahead. I glanced back, expecting those headlights, but they were gone. Marcus's Mustang pulled alongside us, and we stopped on the shoulder, breathing heavily, simply staring into the dark. All we heard in the forest now were crickets and the crackle of our walkie-talkies. The drive back to the Airbnb was utterly silent. We stumbled into the cabin, locking the door, but even that secure haven felt vulnerable after our ordeal. Who were they? We considered various possibilities: poachers, drug traffickers engaged in illicit activities, or something tied to those voices and the old legends of Tate's Hell. At 2 a.m., in such a place, nobody is out for mere recreation. The way they watched us, the way they pursued us without ever rushing, indicated this was no prank. It felt as though they wanted us to experience fear. We never returned. We never discuss it. Not at the Space Center, not anywhere else. But when I drive those solitary Florida roads at night, a small part of me feels permanently heightened, more hyper-aware. In December 2023, I embarked on a 3-week vacation to Japan. My family owns a hotel situated near the modest mountain town of Kaga Onsen in western Japan. It was a substantial Japanese inn, known as a ryokan, built into the hillside adjacent to the Daishoy River. The area surrounding the hotel had been inhabited for at least 2 millennia and was considered a sacred site. My father had mentioned a long time ago that during the hotel's construction, builders discovered old stone blocks and pillars on the property. Apparently, a shrine of some kind had been erected there around the 9th century. Having not stayed at that hotel for over 15 years, I was keen on reliving the experience. Moreover, I enjoy exploring, and recalling my father's story, I decided to venture into the forest below the hotel for some off-trail hiking, hoping to find any remnants of the ancient ruins he had described. Upon arriving in the nearby city of Kanazawa, I rented a car at the station and drove up to the hotel. It was snowing heavily, and traffic was abysmal. The drive, typically an hour, took 2. I reached the hotel around 8 p.m. and let myself in. The hotel was virtually empty in December, as tourists rarely visit this part of Japan in winter. There was no staff whatsoever. I found myself to be the sole occupant. The sensation of being alone in such a large building in the middle of nowhere was quite surreal. I retrieved a key from behind the counter, let myself into one of the suites, and spent the night there. The following day, I ventured into the forest below the hotel. The snow was quite deep, reaching my ankles, and trudging through the rough terrain in boots was an absolute nightmare. I must have walked far enough into the forest to lose my bearings. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. I had been walking for about an hour and had no idea where I was. Surrounded by trees on all sides, a large hill loomed directly in front of me. I thought it would be beneficial to climb to the summit to get a better vantage point and possibly locate any signs of civilization. The ascent was extremely challenging, with the hill's sides being quite steep and rocky. However, to my left, I noticed what appeared to be the vestiges of a path. I slowly made my way towards it. It was a dirt path that meandered upwards towards the hill's summit. The path was slightly overgrown, with dead branches obstructing the way. But soon enough, I managed to reach the top. However, I observed that the path soon disappeared. It simply ended. I scanned the hillside and noticed a small cavity in the hillside above the path, concealed by vegetation, perhaps 5 meters away. I climbed up and found myself standing before the entrance of a small cave. Some mud had washed into the cave, but the opening was large enough for me to pass through. I had a small flashlight, which I shined into the opening. I could see a small alcove ahead of me, with another small opening to the left. As I entered the cave, a distinct odor struck me. I'm unsure how to describe it, but the best comparison would be the smell of an animal at a zoo. The alcove ahead was bare, except for a large rectangular stone block positioned directly in the center. As I ventured deeper, I found myself in a large stone chamber. 2 other side tunnels branched off from this chamber, but I didn't explore them. There was yet another rectangular stone block, this time on the far side of the chamber, and it appeared hollow. I approached the block. To my utter astonishment, human bones seemed to be inside it. Surrounding the bones was a long piece of steel and a collection of old bronze coins, those with a square hole in the center. I just stood there, caught between profound shock and disbelief. I reached down and picked up one of the coins. I don't know why I did it. Pure instinct, I suppose. The coin was ancient and corroded, but some features were still discernible. Before I could examine it closely, a loud crash echoed from deep within one of the side tunnels. I quickly pointed my flashlight towards the source of the sound. The animalistic scent intensified, making the air feel toxic. For some inexplicable reason, I grabbed the long piece of steel lying among the bones and held it in front of me with one hand as a weapon. The light from my flashlight revealed that the long piece of steel appeared to be the remnants of a lengthy blade. I began to back away towards the entrance. The smell was different this time. I could detect smoke beneath that overpowering stench. I heard a rhythmic thumping originating from deep within the tunnel, sounding like someone beating a drum. That's when I completely lost it. I bolted out of the cave back towards the opening. As I ran out, I swear I felt the entire cave vibrate and shake. I leaped from the entrance onto the slope below and tumbled onto the snowy ground. I had dropped the blade in the snow but didn't care to retrieve it. I kept running and running down the slope, crashing through dead twigs and branches. I ran until I heard the distant sound of a car passing. Soon, I found myself on the side of the road. I let out a sigh of relief as I collapsed by the roadside. I managed to flag down a passing car. The driver was initially hesitant to let me in, but seeing my distressed state, he relented. Through conversation with the driver, I discovered I was quite far from the hotel, about 4 miles. Soon enough, I arrived back at the hotel. I returned to my room, packed everything, and got into my car. I no longer felt safe being the sole person in the hotel. I drove back to Kanazawa, where I spent the night. This story, however, has a follow-up. When the hotel became operational again in February, I received a text from my father. He informed me that someone had broken into the hotel through one of the first-floor windows. Surprisingly, nothing was damaged or stolen except for the front door of my room, which had been smashed wide open.